Food inflation is something that's in the news today, and it affects everyone. It's not something new. We've had to deal with it in the past, but it's been several decades, and it's certainly a problem in the 18th century. Food inflation and food problems in the 18th century come up a couple of times. There are crop failures, specifically wheat. Bread is what feeds the populace, and if there's a problem with wheat, then a lot of people go hungry. So what do you do about that? In 1750, William Ellis writes a book called The Country Housewife's Family Companion, and in that book, he has advice for the small farmer in England. And there are lots of different parts of that book: instruction, almost recipes, and anecdotes. And there was this one particular anecdote that caught my eye, specifically in that relating to food inflation and how do you feed yourself. So the title of this little section is just a paragraph. It says, "Barley meal and turnips, boiled in times of famine. A poor woman that lived a mile from my house in a time of famine, having no victuals, made her eldest daughter follow the man that shoveled away the snow in a sort of a path for the sheep to come at the turnips. Here she pulled some up and boiled them to a mash with some barley meal, which she and her several children eat as pap with only salt, and it sustained them much." So there's a bit to this story here that here in the 21st century we may not quite understand, but the idea that someone would go out and shovel the snow away from turnips in a field. So farmers would sow barley and turnips together, they'd harvest the barley, the turnips would continue to grow, and mostly they were grown there as a green manure crop and as something to feed livestock. And what's happening here is the turnips would have a lot of greenery, but very, very small turnips underneath. They were really just meant to feed that livestock after this has been harvested. So they could kind of get two crops out of the field. And the turnips were just left in the ground. Even after the greens were eaten, they'd just sit there and rot. They would be a manure crop in the ground. But there would be turnips. There would be small, little turnips. And even the barley in this context is really a second or third tier grain. It's not necessarily used for making bread, although sometimes they would make a poor version or an inexpensive version of bread with lots of different grains, barley included. But what we see here is a poor man's crop on both sides, both the barley and the turnips. So when there was a crop failure in the wheat crop, then some of these other grains, rye, barley, buckwheat, they would become more popular just because there was not wheat available. I think we need to try out a recipe like this. It's so simple and it's so intriguing. This is what they're eating in times of famine. This is what he says is the lowest of the low food. Let's find out what it tastes like. Turnips in our book here might not mean exactly what we think about turnips. It could be that they mean the standard kind of white purple turnip that we are used to today. There are other references in the 18th century when they talk about turnips and they actually mean rutabagas. We'd even call them Swedes in our time period in Great Britain and in other places like that. In this field setting with the barley, they might even be radishes in the field. And you could see this kind of thing happening with basically any kind of root vegetable. They might even do this exact same thing with potatoes. Now, this anecdote in this 18th century book is really meant to be kind of shocking. This is people eating food that's meant for animals. They're grubbing in the ground for something where, you expect sheep to just go out and eat the grains, and, that was it. That's all that was intended here. And the people are going out and harvesting kind of the leftover. And this reminds me of stories of people here in the 20th century in North America. And when food is expensive or scarce, they'd go out and they'd harvest field corn. And we grow field corn by the millions of acres here. Indiana is a great producer of field corn. And we never think of it as something that we would necessarily go out and eat. That's intended for cows or, whatever, to be processed into some kind of industrial foodstuffs. But in hard times, people would go out and harvest field corn and figure out how to eat it. Our famine food is done. He describes it as a pap, which is something like mashed potato consistency. And this is just our mashed turnips and some barley there. I put in after the fact, kind of mashed those barley or those turnips first, and then put in the barley along with water and cooked it back over again to sort of beef it back up, and then add a little bit of salt, and that's it. No butter, nothing fancy like that. If you don't have anything, you can get this just out of the field. And it's actually very good. He describes it as it sustains them much. There's, this might not be the best meal you've ever had. This is not an expensive restaurant meal, but will it feed the family? Will it keep people alive until spring? Yeah, it will. This is good. This is really good. I talk a lot about stepping out in the shoes of people 200 and 300 years ago, living life exactly like they lived it, even to the point of, tasting exactly what they tasted. And sometimes it's not a fancy meal. It's not a banquet. It's not something amazing. It's something plain. It's something simple. It's something so inexpensive that you just got it out of the field for free. This is experiencing the 18th century. This is understanding what history is really like.